Chapter 9:15. Yi Xing's Void Breaker God Eye had actually lost its effect, and it was no different from what he could see with his naked eyes. The Void Breaker God Eye had a total of 3 levels. When Yi Xing cultivated the first level, he could see through space. Even if it was a starry sky continent with a radius of hundreds of millions of miles, the Void Breaker God Eye's vision could still penetrate it. However, the flames on both sides had the effect of blocking the vision of the Void Breaker God Eye. Yi Xing's Void Breaker God Eye could not see through these flames. The path in front of him was not a straight line. After just a few dozen meters, it curved a little to the right. Therefore, the path ahead of him was still filled with flames, and the Void Breaker God Eye could not see through it. The flames on both sides were extremely hot. Yi Xing used the minor success true meaning of the fire Dao, but he could not block it. Even if he stimulated the star fire seed, he could not attract it. This burning sensation caused Yi Xing to feel bursts of pain. Although with the vitality of a top-grade imperial body, this burning sensation could not affect Yi Xing's life, but it still felt very uncomfortable. Yi Xing wanted to go up to the sky and stand above the flames to look at this planet. However, he found that the void was shrouded in an invisible force. As long as his feet left the ground, this invisible force was like a mountain that could not be lifted. It immediately pushed Yi Xing back to the ground. On this flaming planet, one could not fly, nor could one use eye techniques to see through it. Everything was unknown, and there was only a small path leading to the front. Yi Xing stared at the small path for a while before his eyes shifted to the flames on the side. He then stretched out his right hand and reached into the flames. A sharp pain immediately spread. As soon as Yi Xing's palm came into contact with the flames, it was immediately incinerated into ashes. As if he had received an electric shock, Yi Xing immediately retracted his right hand. His flesh and blood wriggled and regrew a new palm. Looking at the flames on both sides, Yi Xing's eyes were filled with dread. These flames were so terrifying that if he entered, he would soon be incinerated into ashes. Even if his flesh and blood regrew, he would not be able to hold on for long. Yi Xing's gaze once again turned to the path that led to an unknown destination. Other than following the path forward, there seemed to be no other feasible path. Yi Xing took a step forward. Because his legs couldn't leave the ground at the same time, he couldn't use his speed at all. Every step he took was the same as a normal person's, only about half a meter away. Every time Yi Xing wanted to increase his speed, when his feet left the ground at the same time, the invisible force would suppress him. Yi Xing had no choice but to walk forward step by step like an ordinary person. At this speed, he would probably only be able to travel a little more than 100 miles in an entire day. However, Yi Xing's current flying speed was 3,000 miles in a breath. This meant that the distance he could cover in a breath would take him about a month. Yi Xing's current speed was like a tortoise crawling. It was too slow, but he could only walk slowly. There was nothing he could do. This feeling of having strength but not being able to use it was very sullen. Yi Xing took a deep breath and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air. He adjusted his mood and maintained his calm. He followed the path and walked forward step by step. This path was always winding. The straight line distance never exceeded 100 meters. Yi Xing couldn't see the situation in front of him. He could only explore like a blind man, walking forward in an unknown direction. As he walked, Yi Xing was constantly alert, guarding against the flames on both sides of the path. There might be some danger. However, apart from boredom, there wasn't any danger along the way. From the beginning of the meteorite to the first planet, from the first planet to the second planet, from the second planet to the third planet, Yi Xing had experienced a long period of boring flying. Especially from the second planet to the third planet, Yi Xing had flown through the void passage for a full month. Having experienced these boring experiences, Yi Xing's resistance to boredom was still quite strong. Moreover, When cultivators cultivated, they would sometimes go into closed-door cultivation for a year or so, or even several years at a time. They were naturally able to endure loneliness, so Yixing did not feel too bored during the first few months of his journey. However, after Yixing had walked on this path of flames for over a year, the environment was still the same. There were eternal flames on both sides, and there was no end in sight. Yixing felt a sense of dejection in his heart. Along the way, Yixing had been in high spirits at the beginning. He had always been on guard against any danger that might appear from the flames on both sides. But after walking for over a year, there was no danger at all. There was only boredom and loneliness. The first stage tested one's temperament, the second stage tested one's strength, and this third stage should be a test of perseverance? Thinking back to the past year, he had been walking on this path of flames. There had been no danger, no obstacles, and besides being a little slow, the path had been smooth. There was only loneliness and boredom accompanying him. It was irritating and depressing. Thinking that this stage should be a test of perseverance, the dejection in Yixing's heart immediately dissipated. His eyes flashed and his fighting spirit continued to soar. The first and second stages were already difficult. No matter what, he couldn't fail in this third stage. Since it was a test, there had to be an end to this path. Step by step, Yixing walked forward. His heart was filled with hope. As long as he completed this stage, he would be able to obtain Sovereign Star's inheritance. Yixing was filled with incomparable anticipation for the inheritance of a sovereign. And this anticipation turned into motivation, driving Yixing forward and maintaining a high fighting spirit. Time slowly passed as Yixing walked step by step. Another year passed. On both sides of Yixing were eternal flames, and in front of him was a path with no end in sight. The end of this path is just ahead. Sovereign Star's inheritance is waiting for me. Yixing's spirit was always in an excited state. The light of hope in his eyes didn't extinguish as he continued forward. The fourth year, the fifth year, the sixth year, time passed year after year. Yixing kept walking forward on the path of flames. Even though he kept repeating that Sovereign Star's inheritance was waiting for him in front, he still hadn't reached the end after walking for a full 7 years. He couldn't help but feel mentally and physically exhausted. His dejection was becoming more and more obvious. Did I make a mistake? Could this be an illusion? Could this path actually have no end and I won't be able to finish it even if I walk to my death? As time passed, the thoughts in Yixing's mind became more and more complicated. He began to doubt himself and no longer firmly believed that Sovereign Star's inheritance was waiting for him in front. Yixing felt his legs getting heavier and heavier. The difficulty of taking a step was much more difficult than at the beginning. This was due to mental exhaustion. Stop. This path has no end at all. All your efforts are in vain. Continuing forward is also in vain. A voice began to appear in Yixing's mind. His body and mind were exhausted. He wanted to listen to this voice and stop right there. Chapter 9:17. Just stay here and refine the Sovereign's blood. Once you're done, you'll receive the Sovereign's inheritance left behind by Star Sovereign. The artifact spirit, Xingchen, said before disappearing. Yixing looked at the golden blood in front of him with excitement. It took him a while to calm down. Letting out a long breath, Yixing sat on the ground and circulated the stellar glass art. The stellar glass art was the inheritance left behind by Star Sovereign. Obviously, it was a cultivation method that Star Sovereign had practiced before. The power in Star Sovereign's blood was very close to the stellar glass art. Yixing felt the vast energy in the Sovereign's blood as soon as he circulated the stellar glass art. The astral power contained in that tiny drop of golden blood was as vast as the sea, unfathomable and boundless. With the absorption of the stellar glass art, a large amount of astral power surged out of the Sovereign's blood and was absorbed by Yixing. At the same time, Yi Xing also used the chaos whole celestial aspect to produce a powerful devouring power to absorb the energy in the sovereign's blood for his own use. With this two-pronged approach, Yi Xing's cultivation base stabilized and advanced rapidly, making rapid progress. A 9-star king needed to accumulate a large amount of astral power to become a first nirvana quasi-god. Although Yi Xing had been a 9-star king for 24 years, he had been going through trials in the star secret realm for 24 years. Therefore, his cultivation didn't improve much. He was only in the middle stage of the 9th rank. At this moment, Yi Xing's cultivation improved by leaps and bounds. In just 2 hours, he reached the late stage of the 9th rank. Half a day later, he reached the peak of the 9th rank. After another day of absorption, Yi Xing finally touched the limit of the Star Sea realm and felt the barrier of the Star Nirvana realm. The astral power in his body was enough to undergo nirvana. The limit of the Star Sea realm meant that whether it was Yi Xing's meridians, star vortexes, or even his flesh and blood, they were all filled with astral power. He couldn't absorb any more astral power. Only by undergoing nirvana and undergoing a qualitative change in his body could he absorb more astral power. Yi Xing stopped absorbing. The stellar glass spell was a supreme divine art, and it had its own nirvana method. It was more thorough and safer than the nirvana method of ordinary divine art. Nirvana of flesh and blood. Yi Xing shouted in his heart as he used the nirvana technique. The first 3 nirvanas of the star nirvana realm were all nirvana of the flesh and blood. Then, the flesh and blood on Yi Xing's body, starting from his fingertips and toes, began to shatter into tiny particles. Then, they shattered into even tinier leptons, reaching a level that was invisible to the naked eye. Under the observation of the naked eye, the flesh of Yi Xing's hands and feet gradually shattered and disappeared, leaving only the bones. The process of nirvana was very slow. It was already very dangerous for the body to be crushed into particles. If it was crushed into leptons, it would be even more dangerous. One had to be careful and proceed step by step in an absolutely safe environment. One could not be impatient at all. First the hands, then the legs, then the torso, and finally the head. After an entire day, Yi Xing's flesh and blood had completely shattered into leptons, invisible to the naked eye. Yi Xing was only left with bones, but there was a flame in his skull. That was the flame of life. The space between the eyebrows and the sea of consciousness were all hidden in this flame of life. Normally, the flame of life was invisible and traceless, hidden in the flesh and blood. However, when the flesh and blood melted, the flame of life would reveal itself. This flame of life was the source of life for Yi Xing's flesh and blood. It was because of the flame of life that the leptons could maintain their vitality and reform the body. If someone were to sneak attack at this time and extinguish the flame of life, the leptons would lose their vitality and turn into ashes. The body would be completely destroyed, and without the source of life, the flesh and blood would not be able to regrow. Because of this, the nirvana process required an absolutely safe environment. Yi Xing's soul force was powerful and his flame of life was exuberant. His flesh and blood leptons were extremely active. With the flame of life as the center, they spread out in all directions, forming a powerful life force field. If someone with great vision focused their mind, they would barely be able to see with the naked eye that the air around the skeleton seemed to distort. This was the trajectory of the life force field. Under the control of the life force field, Yi Xing's flesh and blood leptons gradually shattered and reformed. The newly formed flesh and blood leptons were much more active than the old ones. Leptons were the smallest form of life. Flesh nirvana was to first turn the flesh and blood into leptons, then gradually nirvana, making the flesh and blood leptons more powerful. Then, the more powerful the flesh and blood leptons would form a body. Naturally, it would have a qualitative breakthrough compared to the previous body, because this was a fundamental change. The nirvana process of the flesh and blood leptons lasted for an entire day. Finally, all the flesh and blood leptons had undergone nirvana and began the final step of the nirvana process, the reconstruction of the flesh and blood. The flesh and blood leptons first condensed into flesh and blood particles, and then the flesh and blood particles condensed into flesh and blood, forming different organs or body parts. When the flesh and blood decomposed, it started from the ends of the limbs and ended at the head. The reconstruction of the flesh and blood was the opposite, starting from the head and ending at the ends of the limbs. After a day, Yi Xing's flesh and blood were completely reconstructed and restored to normal. The entire nirvana process took 3 days. 1 day of decomposition, 1 day of nirvana, and 1 day of reconstruction. Yi Xing looked exactly the same as he did 3 days ago, but his essence had undergone earth-shaking changes. 3 days ago, Yi Xing was a 9-star king. Now, he had successfully undergone nirvana and was a 1-nirvana quasi-god. He had completed the transformation from the star sea realm to the star nirvana realm, turning from a king to a god. The star sea realm and the star nirvana realm were major watersheds in martial art. A king was still considered a mortal, but a quasi-god had the word god in it, and was a god. Yi Xing's aura had an additional ethereal aura, which was the aura of a god. Yi Xing could feel the surging vitality and terrifying power in his body. His divine body was built with the supreme grade imperial body, and it was built with the supreme grade divine arts nirvana art, so its power was shocking. Although the supreme grade divine body represented powerful vitality and could be reborn with a drop of blood, the power it contained couldn't be underestimated. If Yi Xing encountered the iron-winged golden demonic condors in the second stage, he didn't need to use the dark fire Dao arrow. Yi Xing was sure that he could kill an iron-winged golden demonic condor with just one punch with the terrifying power in his divine body. Yi Xing's gaze fell on the golden blood floating in front of him. The astral energy he had absorbed from the golden blood had already allowed him to undergo nirvana, turning from a 9-star king to a quasi-god. However, the golden blood didn't seem to have shrunk by much. The energy Yi Xing had consumed probably wasn't even 10% of the total amount of the golden blood. The energy contained in a drop of supreme blood is indeed surging. No wonder Senior Xing Chen said that it was enough for me to undergo nirvana several times. That's right, Yi Xing thought to himself. He used the stellar glass art and the chaotic whole cosmic aspect to continue absorbing the blood. Chapter 9:18. The energy contained in a single drop of Sovereign's blood was too vast. In just 7 days, Yi Xing had reached his limit as a first nirvana quasi-god, and could undergo a second nirvana. As for the golden blood, it had only shrunk a little, less than 40% of its original size. 3 days later, Yi Xing succeeded in his second nirvana. Half a month later, Yi Xing reached his limit as a second nirvana quasi-god, and began his third nirvana. 3 days later, Yi Xing became a third nirvana quasi-god. In a total of about a month, Yi Xing had undergone 3 nirvanas, and his star glass art had advanced to the second level. However, the golden blood had not been completely exhausted. There was still a small drop floating in front of Yi Xing, about 20% of the total. Yi Xing continued to use the star glass art to refine and absorb. 7 days later, he finally absorbed all of the astral energy in the Sovereign's blood. Yi Xing's third stage, star nirvana cultivation, had been greatly consolidated. However, he was still far from undergoing 4 nirvanas. After 4 nirvanas, he would become a mid-tier quasi-god. Moreover, from the 4th nirvana onwards, not only would his flesh undergo nirvana, but his bones would also undergo nirvana. The amount of energy required would naturally be much higher than the previous 3 nirvanas. Yi Xing stood up and felt the surging energy in his body. The vigorous divine energy felt like a dream. A month ago, he was only a 9-star king. Now, he was a third nirvana quasi-god. This kind of progress was truly inconceivable. Advancing by leaps and bounds was not enough to describe it. All of this was because of a single drop of sovereign's blood. This allowed Yi Xing to gain a deeper understanding of sovereigns. Sovereigns of the martial Tao were indeed worthy of being called sovereigns. A single drop of blood was already so terrifying. It was unimaginable how powerful their true bodies would be. The space in front of Yi Xing rippled, and the artifact spirit star appeared once more. Senior Star. Yi Xing nodded slightly. Very good, very good. You've gone through 3 nirvanas, yet you still have quite a bit of sovereign's blood left. It can be seen that your attainments in archery are quite good, and your compatibility with the Star Sovereign's blood is very high. Now that you possess the Star Sovereign's bloodline, you can obtain the true inheritance left behind by the Star Sovereign. Yi Xing's eyes lit up. The artifact spirit continued. Star Sovereign left behind 2 secret manuals and 2 treasures for his successor. The 2 manuals are the Sovereign Level Cultivation Technique, Star Glaze Technique, and the Sovereign Level Body Technique, Star Immortal Body. The 2 treasures are the Sovereign Level Talisman, Realm Breaker Talisman, and the Sovereign Level Artifact, Star Palace. As soon as it finished speaking, Xing Chen waved its hand and 3 items appeared in front of Yi Xing. 2 jade slips and 1 astral talisman. Yi Xing's heart surged with excitement. The 4 items left behind by the Star Sovereign were all sovereign-level treasures. Even for true gods, they were rare treasures. In the Flowing Light Boundary, the Dark Star Divine Palace, the Radiance Divine Palace, and the Star River Divine Palace, these 3 5-star forces could take out a few top-grade divine-grade treasures, but they did not have a single supreme-grade treasure. It was clear how rare supreme-grade treasures were. This was because only sovereigns had sovereign-level treasures. The first 2 jade slips recorded the Star Glaze Technique and the Star Immortal Body. The Astral Talisman was naturally the Realm Breaker Talisman. As for the Star Palace, Yi Xing was currently in the Star Palace. Yi Xing put away the 2 jade slips and the Realm Breaker Talisman. Xing Chen continued, I'll give you the Star Glaze Technique, the Star Immortal Body, and the Realm Breaker Talisman. However, you can't take the Star Palace yet. Star Sovereign used the Star Palace as the formation core to set up the Star Secret Realm. You have to cultivate the Star Glaze Technique to level 7 and above before you can take the Star Palace out of the Star Secret Realm. Yi Xing was surprised. Level 7 of the Star Glaze Technique? That's the highest level. Even true gods can't cultivate to level 7. Xing Chen glanced at Yi Xing. Who said that the Star Glaze Technique only has level 7? Level 7 is indeed difficult for true gods, but that's only for normal true gods. If you're good enough, true gods can cultivate to level 9. Level 9? The inheritance of Star Glaze spell that Yi Xing had received from real god Tiangong only had 7 levels. He immediately took out the jade slip that recorded Star Glaze spell and used his mental power to scan the contents into his superbrain. Xing Chen was right. The Star Glaze Technique did have 9 levels. The 7th level of the Stellar Glass spell was a top-grade divine-grade item. Only the 9th level of the Stellar Glass spell was complete, and its grade was Supreme Grade. The Stellar Glass spell left behind by Star Sovereign was complete, while true god Tiangong had only obtained an incomplete one. Real god Tiangong cultivated the Star Glaze Technique to level 7 and was invincible in the Flowing Light world. If he cultivated to level 9, his power would be unimaginable. Yi Xing took out the jade slip that recorded the Star Immortal Body and scanned the contents into his brain. He was even more shocked. The Star Glaze secret art was a cultivation method, while the Star Immortal Body was a body technique. Yi Xing was shocked by its ability to strengthen his body. It was terrifying. The Star Immortal Body only had 4 levels. Once cultivated to level 1, the body would be as strong as a middle-grade divine weapon. Level 2, the body would be as strong as a high-grade divine weapon. Level 3, the body would be as strong as a divine weapon. The fourth layer was the highest level. The toughness of the body was even more shocking. It could reach the toughness of a supreme weapon. Yi Xing did not know how strong a supreme weapon was, but he was sure that a real god would not be able to damage it. Yi Xing knew how strong a middle-grade divine weapon was. Without using special methods, a quasi-god below the 7 nirvana would not be able to damage a middle-grade divine weapon. Even a real god would find it difficult to destroy a middle-grade divine weapon. This meant that as long as one cultivated to level 1 of the star immortal body, he could stand still and let a quasi-god attack him. His defensive power was insanely strong. In addition, Yi Xing's divine body was a supreme weapon. His vitality was extremely strong. He could be reborn from a drop of blood as soon as he cultivated the divine body. In other words, if his body was damaged until there was only a drop of blood left, he could rebuild his body. If Yi Xing's body was as strong as a middle-grade divine weapon, who could destroy it until there was only a drop of blood left? By then, even a real god would not be able to kill him. As for the boundary-breaking talisman, as a supreme treasure, it must have an extremely heaven-defying function. From its name, Yi Xing could see the function of the boundary-breaking talisman. It should be able to bring people through the space between realms, just like how the great space-breaking talisman could bring people through the space of the starry sky continent. The artifact spirit said, "You have obtained the Star Sovereign's inheritance. If others knew about it, you would be killed for sure. Countless true gods would want to kill you and steal your treasures." Therefore, the Star Sovereign had left behind a will that whoever obtains his inheritance must cultivate the Star Immortal body to the first level in order to leave the Star Secret Realm. That way, you would be able to protect yourself even when facing true gods. Furthermore, in order to avoid death, he had also left you with the Breaking Boundary Talisman. The Breaking Boundary Talisman can take you to another realm and save you from a life-threatening danger. Chapter 924. In this round, Yi Xing's opponent was Lu Xingwu, a quasi-god 6 nirvana. Quasi-god 6 nirvana was the highest level of cultivation among the core disciples. Of all the core disciples in the Dark Star Divine Hall, there were only 6 quasi-gods 6 nirvana. In this battle, Yi Xing's arena was still the focus of everyone's attention. In the previous battles, Yi Xing had won very easily and had not shown the limits of his strength. But in this battle, his opponent was Lu Xingwu, a quasi-god 6 nirvana. Everyone guessed that Yi Xing would be in for a tough battle against such a powerful opponent, and the limits of his strength would be exposed. Even so, it was still unknown whether Yi Xing could win this battle and enter the top 8. Unfortunately, everyone's guess was once again completely wrong. Yi Xing and Lu Xingwu's battle was not as tough as they had expected. Yi Xing used the medial quality divine weapon, the Azure Sandalwood divine bow, and used the Ashen Flame Void Annihilating Arrow art to break through Lu Xingwu's attack with 1 arrow, break through Lu Xingwu's defense with 2 arrows, and send Lu Xingwu flying with the 3rd arrow, spraying blood across the sky. Yi Xing won, and easily at that, defeating his opponent with 3 arrows. This result was beyond everyone's expectations, and they were all dumbfounded. Yi Xing's strength was not just on par with Quasi-God 6 Nirvana, it was far superior. High in the clouds, the Dark Star Emperor's expression turned unsightly. He had organized the strongest core disciple competition not to know Yi Xing's strength, but Yi Xing's vitality. However, the strength of one's vitality was not as easy to determine as one's cultivation. If the Dark Star Emperor wanted to know Yi Xing's vitality, he would have to see how Yi Xing recovered from his injuries. Moreover, this was not something that could be determined by a small injury. It had to be a serious injury. But up until now, Yi Xing had entered the top 8, and yet he had not been injured in the slightest. Moreover, not only was he completely unscathed, but he had also completely crushed his opponent. Even quasi-god 6 Nirvana opponents were no exception. If Yi Xing hadn't been injured, this competition would have been held in vain. How could the Dark Star Emperor be happy? Gao Man stood beside the Dark Star Emperor and knew what he was thinking just by looking at the Dark Star Emperor's expression. Soon, the battles in the other arenas also ended. The top 8 had been decided, and the inner court deacons quickly arranged the list of participants for the next round. 4 more arenas were taken away. In this round, Yi Xing's opponent was another quasi-god of 6th Nirvana. However, it was not one of the 3 people who were much stronger than ordinary quasi-gods of 6th Nirvana, such as Xue Baodong, Gu Kaiyang, or Su Tianyi. The strength of the opponent in this round was about the same as Lu Xingwu. Yi Xing used the Azure Sandalwood Divine Bow and executed the Grey Flame Void Annihilation Arrow technique, easily obtaining victory and entering the top 4. Xue Baotong, Gu Kaiyang, and Su Tianyi were indeed geniuses who could fight above their level in the quasi-god realm. They also defeated their opponents and entered the top 4. The next round would be the semi-finals of the top 4. 2 more arenas were taken away. Arena number 1, Xue Baotong vs. Su Tianyi. Arena number 2, Yi Xing vs. Gu Kaiyang. The inner court deacons quickly arranged the list of participants and announced it. Xue Baotong glared at Yi Xing and entered arena number 1 with Su Tianyi. Yi Xing also glanced at Xue Baotong and entered arena number 2 with Gu Kaiyang. 45 years ago, when Yi Xing broke through to the 9-star king level and went to the Heavenly Bao continent, he was intercepted by Xue Baodong and exposed his supreme astrology, which was discovered by the Dark Star Emperor. This year's strongest core disciple competition was a rare opportunity to vent his anger on Xue Baodong, but he didn't encounter it. Even in the semi-finals of the top 2, they were not assigned to the same arena. It was a pity. Xue Baodong's mentality was similar. He was extremely confident in his own strength. Even if Yi Xing's performance was extremely heaven-defying, he still had enough confidence to defeat Yi Xing. He couldn't wait to enter the same arena with Yi Xing and beat Yi Xing up. Both of them wanted to beat the other up, and this dream had come true. In the semifinals, Xue Baotong and Yi Xing both won. Xue Baotong and Su Tianyi's strength was similar. The two of them exchanged more than 100 moves before Xue Baotong seized the opportunity to defeat Su Tianyi. Yi Xing and Gu Kaiyang's battle was about the same. Gu Kaiyang's strength was much stronger than Lu Xingwu's. Yi Xing didn't use any new trump cards, still using the Azure Sandalwood Divine Bow, the Azure Flame Void Annihilation Arrow Art, and the Vermilion Astrology. Then, with the help of the Wind Shadow Divine Evasion Technique Speed, he defeated Gu Kaiyang with great difficulty. Xue Baotong and Yi Xing both won with great difficulty. Everyone judged that their strength should be about the same. In this final battle, it wouldn't be easy to determine the winner. However, the Dark Star Emperor was very clear in his heart. Yi Xing had the supreme astrology, but his true strength hadn't been revealed yet. Although the Dark Star Emperor's expression was ugly, he wasn't completely helpless. He looked at Gao Man. Gao Man received the signal and said loudly, "The strongest core disciple competition is about to usher in the final battle. The winner will be the strongest core disciple and will receive the Divine Emperor's Nirvana Divine Pill as a reward. Such an important battle naturally can't be missed. The Divine Emperor has decided that the final battle will be held in 2 hours. In these 2 hours, the two of them will have a good rest, recover their energy, and face the final battle in their best condition. Moreover, the final battle is related to the Nirvana Divine Pill and cannot be easily decided. The Divine Emperor has given special permission that the final battle can be held without any rules. It can be a life and death battle without any scruples." Everyone was shocked when they heard this. The final battle could be held without any rules. It meant that even if one of them killed the other in the final battle, it would be under the Divine Emperor's orders and wouldn't be punished by the palace's rules. Everyone could already smell the smoke of the final battle. Hearing this, Shui Baodong's eyes lit up with joy. He had always wanted to kill Yi Xing. Now, with the Divine Emperor's order, he could finally kill Yi Xing in the competition. His heart was filled with joy. As for Yi Xing, he was also filled with killing intent. Since the Dark Star Emperor had given the order, he didn't have any scruples. He could use this opportunity to take revenge. After Gao Man gave the Divine Emperor's order, he disappeared. Then, the inner court elder Shuinan also disappeared from his seat. Not long after, Gao Man returned to the Dark Star Emperor's side. Shui Baotong was summoned by Shuinan and disappeared from everyone's sight. Yi Xing frowned slightly, thinking that Shui Baotong would definitely play some trick. He immediately activated his void-piercing divine eyes and looked at Shuinan and Shui Baotong. Shuinan first took out a high-grade divine weapon and gave it to Shui Baotong. Then, he took out a mid-grade divine armor and a short spear that shone brightly. It was a divine-level forbidden weapon that contained terrifying power. Shuinan said to Shui Baotong, "The Divine Emperor's order is for you to use the Qi-Long divine armor to protect yourself. First, use the high-grade divine weapon to injure Yi Xing. If you can't, use the forbidden weapon, the bloodthirsty divine spear. Do you remember?" Chapter 928. Celestial Cloud Palace, a quiet room at the back of the palace. Yi Xing calmed his mind, took out the Nirvana Divine Pill, and swallowed it. The surging medicinal power was quickly absorbed by Yi Xing. His limbs, bones, flesh, and blood were all strengthened by the medicinal power of the Nirvana Divine Pill. Yi Xing's quasi-god third Nirvana cultivation base grew stronger and stronger. When the pill entered the body, the medicinal power would automatically spread, and absorption was much faster than refining the sovereign's blood. In less than an hour, Yi Xing's cultivation base had already stabilized to the limit of quasi-god third nirvana. There was still a large amount of medicinal power in his body, enough for him to undergo the fourth nirvana. Starting from the ends of his limbs, Yi Xing's flesh began to shatter. This time, it was not only his flesh that underwent nirvana, but also his bones first. His flesh and blood shattered into life particles, and then into life leptons invisible to the naked eye. Only his bones were left. Then, his bones also began to shatter from the ends of his limbs. This time, because his bones were also shattered, the speed of his divine body shattering was much slower than the previous 3 nirvanas. It took a full 2 days to complete the shattering. Yi Xing's body had completely disappeared, and even his bones did not exist. Only a flame of life was left floating in the void, representing that Yi Xing's life had not been extinguished. Yi Xing's flesh, blood, and bones had all turned into life leptons. With the flame of life as the center, the life leptons formed a life force field, constantly shattering and reforming, undergoing nirvana. With the addition of the bones undergoing nirvana, the nirvana process this time took longer than the previous 3 nirvanas, lasting for 2 days. 2 days later, all the life leptons were reborn, and the nirvana rebirth began. The third step, the reconstruction of the body. First was the reconstruction of the skull, then the bones of the body, and finally the bones of the limbs. The reconstruction of the bones of the entire body was complete, and compared to before the nirvana, there was a layer of luster. Whether it was density or strength, there was a qualitative change. Then, the reconstruction of the flesh began. First, it was the head, then the body, and finally the limbs. The whole process took another 2 days. After a total of 6 days, Yi Xing's 4th nirvana was completely completed. His godly spirit aura had undergone a qualitative upgrade, and he was now a quasi-god of nirvana. This was a breakthrough from a beginner quasi-god to a mid-tier quasi-god. Outside the quiet room, the Dark Star Emperor had been using the surveillance formation to observe every movement in the quiet room. As Yi Xing's nirvana neared, the Dark Star Emperor became happier and happier. When he saw that Yi Xing had completed his nirvana, the Dark Star Emperor's joy reached its peak. He was extremely excited, and his eyes were filled with desire. It was as if hope was right in front of him, and he could grab it with a stretch of his hand. Ha 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 ha! The Dark Star Emperor couldn't contain his joy and laughed heartily. It was as if he could see the scene of him becoming a supreme being. At that time, he would not only be the divine emperor of a country, but also the lord of a realm. He would be a supreme existence that could traverse countless realms. Amidst his laughter, the Dark Star Emperor entered the quiet room. At this moment, the Dark Star Emperor no longer concealed his inner thoughts. He looked at Yi Xing with a gaze that revealed his desire and ruthlessness. In the eyes of the Dark Star Emperor, Yi Xing was a turtle in a jar, a little lamb waiting to be slaughtered. There was no room for resistance. Even if Yi Xing's strength had reached the level of a true god, the Dark Star Emperor didn't care. He was a 10-star true god. He didn't even care about Kyuhoshi, let alone ordinary 1-star, 2-star, and 3-star true gods. He could casually pinch them to death with a stretch of his hand. Yi Xing's gaze also looked at the Dark Star Emperor. It was also different from before. He knew that the success of his nirvana was the time for the Dark Star Emperor to tear off his mask. There was no need for him to continue to be respectful to the Dark Star Emperor. Yi Xing also didn't treat someone who wanted to snatch his supreme astral form as his master. Instead, he treated him as a mortal enemy. Yi Xing's consciousness was connected to the boundary-breaking talisman. His divine power wrapped around the boundary-breaking talisman. He could leave at any time with a thought. Therefore, Yi Xing didn't feel the slightest bit nervous when looking at the Dark Star Emperor. Yi Xing's lips curled into a smile. Dark Star Emperor, you've finally torn off your mask and are going to make a move on me? The Dark Star Emperor's expression was surprised. There was something wrong with the development of this plot. His gaze had so blatantly expressed his thought. Yi Xing should be surprised, puzzled, scared, puzzled, and so on. Why did he have such a confident and omniscient look? The Dark Star Emperor was shocked. How do you know what I'm going to do to you? Yi Xing chuckled. You're just after my supreme astral form, aren't you? You want to transfer my supreme astral form into your body so that you can use it to become a supreme being. The Dark Star Emperor's heart trembled. From what Yi Xing said, it seemed that Yi Xing even knew that he had the astral form diversion technique. You really know a lot. The Dark Star Emperor's expression quickly returned to normal. He sneered. However, even if you know, what's the use? You've been under my surveillance all this time and have nowhere to run. Now you're like a turtle in a jar. What power do you have to resist? The Dark Star Emperor's smile gradually turned sinister. If you don't know, you'll feel better for a while. Now that you know, won't every day be like a year? Won't your heart be filled with pain and only despair? Yi Xing smiled. His expression was calm. Your Excellency Divine Emperor, do I look like I'm in pain and filled with despair? The Dark Star Emperor stopped smiling. His gaze was like an arrow as he stared at Yi Xing. It was as if he wanted to see through Yi Xing. Could it be that you can still escape from the palm of my hand? Yi Xing smiled mysteriously. Divine Emperor, don't look at me. I'm someone who has entered the Star's secret realm. How can you understand the methods of a Star Supreme? Hearing this, the Dark Star Emperor's expression changed greatly. Yi Xing's expression was too confident. He was starting to believe that Yi Xing had indeed obtained some kind of escape treasure in the Star's secret realm. Whoosh! The Dark Star Emperor spread out his 5 fingers. 5 streaks of godly power shot out, turning into 5 divine dragons that charged towards Yi Xing. The space in the quiet room instantly froze. The power of space imprisonment was much more terrifying than Yi Xing's power. Even an ordinary true god wouldn't be able to move. The Dark Star Emperor's attack was as fast as lightning. He wanted to capture Yi Xing. In the blink of an eye, the 5 divine dragons had tightly bound Yi Xing. If Yi Xing had any methods, he wouldn't be able to use them at all. However, Yi Xing was already prepared. He didn't need to use the boundary-breaking talisman at all. He only needed to think about it. No matter how powerful the Dark Star Emperor was, he wouldn't be able to stop Yi Xing from thinking about it. In the blink of an eye, the boundary-breaking talisman was activated. A bright ray of light instantly shot out from Yi Xing's body, breaking through the obstruction of space and shooting towards the sky. The 5 divine dragons that were coiling around Yi Xing's body instantly shattered. Yi Xing's figure instantly disappeared along with the ray of light. The Dark Star Emperor was shocked. He immediately shuttled through the void and chased after the ray of light. However, in the blink of an eye, he lost track of Yi Xing. Chapter 931. Yi Xing looked at True God Wu Jiu curiously. Black-yellow spiritual energy? What is that? True God Wu Jiu said, Black-yellow spiritual energy is the origin energy of the world when the universe was first created. It is the origin of all the great Daos of the universe. A wisp of black-yellow spiritual energy is enough for me to reach the middle stage of the star god realm from the early stage. Quasi-gods were at the star nirvana realm, and the star god realm was the true god realm. True God Wu Jiu's voice was filled with anticipation, and his eyes were full of hope. It was obvious that he longed for the black-yellow spiritual energy. According to True God Wu Jiu, the black-yellow spiritual energy was the best treasure for warriors to cultivate. It was extremely effective for both quasi-gods and true gods. Yi Xing was also tempted by the black-yellow spiritual energy. Yi Xing asked, Big Brother, since you have heard that the black-yellow spiritual energy has appeared in the silver star boundary, why don't you go and take a look? True God Wu Jiu shook his head. The black-yellow spiritual energy is located in the black-yellow space. In the black-yellow space, the universe is not yet formed, and the space is chaotic. There are space cracks everywhere, and there are even space storms. For a 1-star true god like me, there is a high chance of death. Moreover, many 2-star true gods and 3-star true gods of the star origin continent have entered the black-yellow space because of the black-yellow spiritual energy. The number 1 expert, the sect master of the Golden Cauldron Divine Sect, even brought along the Golden Cauldron Divine Sect's most precious treasure, the primeval Chaos Golden Cauldron, there. Moreover, I have heard that the true god experts of the Milky Way continent have also gone there. The Milky Way continent even has Kyohoshi. If a 1-star true god like me were to enter the black-yellow space, not to mention the dangers of the black-yellow space, even if I were to encounter other true god experts, I would still be dead. I can't go. In terms of strength, Yi Xing was confident that he was stronger than a 1-star true god. In terms of physical strength and vitality, he was far superior. Moreover, his speed was unparalleled, and he was not inferior to a true god expert. Yi Xing felt that perhaps he could enter the black-yellow space and try his luck. Yi Xing smiled. I wonder where the mysterious yellow space is located? Real God Wu Jiu said, the mysterious yellow space is ethereal and without a trace. It is not fixed at a certain place. Instead, it moves around the silver star boundary. However, if you want to find it, it is not impossible to find it. The mysterious yellow spiritual energy is extremely pure and it is the origin of all things. As long as you are near the mysterious yellow space, you will definitely be able to feel the aura of the mysterious yellow spiritual energy. Then, you will be able to find the specific location of the mysterious yellow space through the aura of the mysterious yellow spiritual energy. After saying that, Real God Wu Jiu waved his hand and shook his head. It's useless to say all these. I can't enter the mysterious yellow space and neither can you. Let's talk about something more practical. Is there anything that you want in the Xingxian auction 3 days later? Although Wu Jiuzhen thought highly of Yi Xing and believed that Yi Xing was a top quasi-god, He didn't compare Yi Xing to a true god. Yi Xing chuckled. Naturally, he wouldn't say that he wanted to go to the mysterious yellow space. For the auction 3 days later, I only want the divine feather green gold. It doesn't conflict with what you want, right? Real God Wujiu was slightly surprised and said, the divine feather green gold is a high-grade divine level material. It is very expensive. Unless you sell the only high-grade divine weapon you have, how can you afford it? What you want is the healing divine pill, the regeneration creation pill. Yi Xing was only a 4 nirvana quasi-god. As for the divine feather green gold, it was a treasure that even true god experts would fight over. Real God Wujiu was very doubtful whether Yi Xing had enough money to buy it. Yi Xing was happy that it didn't conflict with what real God Wujiu wanted. He said, other than the divine feather green gold, I am not interested in the other auction items. Brother, why don't we go to the auction together 3 days later? True God Wujiu found it harder and harder to see through Yi Xing's depth. He only felt that Yi Xing had extraordinary potential. True God Wujiu was only an ordinary 1-star true god. He was very satisfied to be friends with a quasi-god with great potential. This meant that he might have a true god as a friend in the future. Okay, we will go to the auction together 3 days later. I have a VIP card. You can enter with a ticket at that time and just follow me in. True God Wujiu patted his chest and agreed. Although he was only an ordinary 1-star true god, he was still a true god. He was an existence that stood at the pinnacle of martial arts in the Xingyuan continent. There were less than 100 true gods in the entire Xingyuan continent. He was one of them. His status was naturally respected, and he was a VIP at the auction. 3 days later, Yi Xing and true god Wujiu arrived at the Xingshuan auction house. The staff at the auction house respectfully welcomed true god Wujiu inside. As a true god VIP, he naturally had the right to bring others in. Yi Xing and true god Wujiu walked side by side. They were also respectfully received by the staff at the auction house. The Xingshuan auction house was held once every 1,000 years. Its scale was huge. A king could only attend the auction once in their lifetime. Moreover, they did not have the right to enter. Even a quasi-god's lifespan was limited. They could only attend a few auctions. True god experts, on the other hand, had a lifespan of 30,000 years. They could attend many auctions. Therefore, every true god expert had their own VIP room. True god Wujiu's VIP room number was 087. For the Xingyuan continent, where there were less than 100 true gods, the number 087 was really at the back. True god Wujiu brought Yi Xing into VIP room 087. Although it was ranked towards the back, the facilities inside were not simple and crude. Instead, they were extremely luxurious. Furthermore, there were 4 beautiful female king maids who were dressed in alluring attire that could captivate one's mind. Lord True God Wujiu and Yi Xing had just sat down when the 4 maids approached them in pairs. One of them massaged their legs while the other massaged their shoulders. From the VIP rooms, one could see the scene in the auction hall through the projection of an array. The auction hall was an extremely large space. It was over 1,000 meters long and wide. There were over 10,000 seats inside. Each seat took up a large space. It was not crowded, but it could not compare to the luxury of the VIP rooms. Although quasi-gods and true gods were both gods, there was an almost insurmountable gap between the two. Their statuses were on completely different levels. The Xingshuan auction house was held once every 1,000 years. Quasi-gods could only attend it a few times in their lifetime. Therefore, every time it was held, the auction would be very lively. Although the true gods in the VIP rooms could bring some quasi-gods in, the ordinary seats in the auction hall were all sold out. As quasi-gods entered one after another, the auction hall was soon filled with people. The Xingshuan auction house had officially begun. In an auction, the more important an item was, the more it would be put at the end of the auction. divine feather green gold, as a high-grade divine-level material, was abnormally precious. It would definitely be put at the end of the auction. Yixing narrowed his eyes. He had already seen the auction brochure. If the divine feather green gold did not appear, Yixing would not be interested. True God Wujiu, on the other hand, was paying attention to the auction process. Apart from the regeneration creation pill, he also had his eyes on 2 middle-grade divine-level treasures. 4 middle-grade divine-level treasures, quasi-gods competed more than true gods. When true God Wujiu made his move, others, including the true gods in the VIP rooms, did not compete too fiercely with true God Wujiu. The 2 middle-grade divine-level treasures that they wanted both ended up in true God Wujiu's hands. Chapter 939. As soon as real God Zhuanan came out of the dimensional void, he felt a strong murderous intent shrouding him. His heart trembled as he sensed the danger of death. Flame millstone protection. Real God Zhuanan immediately unleashed a defensive move. He used his gloves, which were top-grade divine weapons, and a millstone-like flaming palm energy covered his entire body. At the same time, he activated his divine power and formed a strong defensive shield. Previously, real God Zhuanan had blocked the arrows that Yixing had shot out with such a defense. Real God Zhuanan already knew that real God Jiqing was following the aura that he had left behind and would catch up with him soon. Real God Jiqing was one of the top 3 real God elders in the Golden Cauldron Divine Sect. His fighting power was at the 3-star level. As long as he could stall Yixing for 10 breaths of time, real God Jiqing would naturally be able to kill the arrow god when he arrived. Real God Zhuanan's plan was correct. However, he had not expected Yixing to be so much stronger than he had been outside Xingxian City. The dark fire path arrow instantly shot into the flaming millstone-like palm's strength and penetrated it easily. Then, it penetrated the divine power shield. Its power was still strong and it shot into real God Zhuanan's divine body. A real god's divine body had much stronger vitality than a quasi-god's divine body. At the very least, it was at the level of blood rebirth. Moreover, the sturdiness of a divine body was much higher than that of a quasi-god's divine body. However, real God Zhuanan's divine body cracked when he was hit by the dark fire arrow. Especially at the spot where the arrow had hit, there was a bowl-sized hole. Moreover, the flesh at the edge of the hole was quickly disintegrating and turning into life particles. It had reached a stage where the flesh could not be reborn. If it was a disintegrated wound or flesh, it could be reborn. To a real god, such an injury was not considered an injury. There was no need to consume life force as the flesh could heal itself. However, if the flesh was disintegrated into life entropy and could not heal itself, it would have to consume life force to regenerate the flesh. Such an injury would damage life force. If this kind of damage was severe enough, it would consume a lot of vitality. When it reached a certain level, even the god body that had been regenerated from a drop of blood would lose its life. Regardless of whether it was the attributes of the silver dragon heaven-shooting bow or the power of the divine ability itself, they all had extremely terrifying lethality. They were extremely destructive to one's vitality. When combined together, it was a devastating blow to a true god. In the blink of an eye, real God Zhuanan felt that he had lost more than 50% of his vitality. Supreme astral form, supreme grade divine bow. Only then did true God Zhuanan realize that Yixing's astrology and divine weapons had changed. He was greatly alarmed. Coupled with the fact that his life force was rapidly fading away, he could feel the aura of death. His heart was filled with fear. Whoosh! Yixing shot out another arrow. This time, it was the wind-fire Dao arrow. The speed of the wind and fire Dao arrow was even faster. Before real God Zhuanan could fully recover from the injuries he had suffered from the dark fire Dao arrow, the wind and fire Dao arrow had already entered his body. It was so fast that real God Zhuanan, who was severely injured, couldn't react in time. Real God Zwanan let out a blood-curdling scream. This time, his divine body completely disintegrated. In a breath's time, his body had completely disintegrated into particles of life and scattered in all directions. A true god's life had fallen just like that. The supreme grade divine bow combined with the divine valor archery Dao arrow had terrifying lethality. Yi Xing was only a 4 Nirvana quasi-god and couldn't unleash the full power of the bow. However, he had still killed real God Zwanan with 2 arrows. If Yi Xing's cultivation was higher and he could unleash the full power of the supreme grade divine bow and divine ability, he would have been able to easily kill an ordinary true god. Yi Xing could sense that the expert chasing after him was getting closer and closer. He used the divine eye of Void Breaker and saw the figure of the other party. This was an expert who was much stronger than real God Zwanan. Yi Xing waved his hand and grabbed real God Zwanan's relic. Then, he continued to teleport through the void. In less than 10 breaths' time, real God Ji Cheng appeared at the place where real God Zwanan had fallen. He opened his divine eye of martial arts and could see the disintegrated particles of life that had yet to completely dissipate. He couldn't sense real God Zwanan's aura of life anymore. It was obvious that real God Zwanan had fallen. Real God Ji Cheng was both furious and surprised. Although real God Zwanan was only a 1-star real god, he was still a real god. Even if he were to attack, it would be easy to defeat real God Zwanan but difficult to kill him. Who could actually kill real God Zwanan in such a short period of time? Although real God Ji Cheng didn't think that he could kill real God Zwanan in such a short period of time, he still locked onto real God Zwanan with his mind and teleported along the space ripples. From real God Ji Cheng's point of view, if the other party was really powerful, there was no need for him to escape. If he could kill real God Zwanan so quickly, he should have a treasure with great lethality. As for him, he was a 3-star real god. Some of the treasures with great lethality could kill a 1-star real god, but they might not be able to deal with a 2-star real god, let alone a 3-star real god. After all, no matter how great the lethality was, it would only be effective if it hit the target. In front of a true expert, no matter how great the lethality of the treasure was, as long as it wasn't powerful enough, it would be useless. After killing one, there's another. He's really persistent. The speed of this person's teleportation is even faster than real God Zwanan's. It's even faster than mine. If I continue to chase like this, he'll catch up with me sooner or later. Yi Xing was in a bad mood. Originally, he wanted to kill real God Zwanan quickly so that he could escape. However, he didn't expect that the expert chasing after him would have such great mental strength. Although he was still far away, he had already locked onto his mind. Plus, after teleporting, the space ripples in the void wouldn't disappear instantly. The other party could follow the space ripples and chase after him. Qing Yun wings could increase one's movement speed greatly, but it didn't have much effect on teleportation. The reason why his teleportation speed was so fast was because of the penetrating power of arrow essence. That was why he was faster than an ordinary real god. In order to avoid being chased by the other party, Yi Xing shuttled through the space barrier continuously. Sometimes, he would enter the starry sky continent. Sometimes, he would enter the boundless void. He shuttled between different spaces. When he wasn't in the same space, it was much more difficult to lock onto his mind. However, the other party could still catch up with him through the space ripples. However, in that case, the other party had to follow the path that Yi Xing took when he shuttled through the void. The distance that Yi Xing could teleport was the same as the distance that the other party could chase after. Only then could they find the next space ripple. In that case, the speed of the other party slowed down. The two of them, one running and one chasing, shuttled through more than 10 starry sky continents continuously. When Yi Xing shuttled through the boundless void again, he suddenly felt a weak but extremely pure star spiritual energy. This is? Yixing's heart jumped and he instantly recalled what real god Wujiu had said. Chapter 944. Clang. Yixing's body shot through the air like a cannonball, traveling tens of thousands of li in an instant. Yixing was well aware of the Chaos Golden Cauldron's approach. Since he couldn't avoid it, he naturally had to use the force of this collision to flee. His divine body was even tougher than a medial-quality divine weapon, so he wasn't afraid of the opponent's attack. Thus, he didn't try to block it. Instead, he used the force of the collision to charge forward, instantly pulling away from true god Jin Ao. However, the Chaos Golden Cauldron's collision was truly frightening, and most importantly, it was also very profound. Even though Yixing's divine body was heaven-defying in defense, he still couldn't help but suffer tensome wounds that were deep enough to see bone and spurt blood. Wherever he passed, he left behind a long trail of blood that spilled for tens of thousands of li. However, Yixing's vitality was at the blood rebirth level. As long as his divine body had a single drop of blood left, he could be reborn. Although he had lost a lot of blood, his divine body was still there, and he still had a lot of divine blood in his body, so his injuries weren't that serious. In the blink of an eye, Yixing's injuries were healed, and he hadn't even consumed 1/10 of his vitality. From the moment Yixing was attacked by Quasi-God 7 Nirvana's arrow to being sent flying by true god Jin Ao's Chaos Golden Cauldron, only the blink of an eye had passed. Yixing suffered continuous attacks. Although he was injured, he did not fall into an encirclement and continued to flee. Whether it was the Quasi-God 7 Nirvana archer or the 4-star True God sect master Jin Ao, they were both shocked. A mere quasi-god for Nirvana actually had such a powerful defense? Wasn't this divine body a little too heaven-defying? After being sent flying several hundred li by the Chaos Golden Cauldron, Yixing immediately changed directions and fled in the same direction as Quasi-God 7 Nirvana. Although changing directions allowed him to close the distance between him and True God Jin Ao, True God Jin Ao's speed wasn't enough to stop Yixing the Ish. At this moment, Quasi-God 7 Nirvana's archer fired another arrow. This golden arrow was like a divine spear that was 100 li long, traveling 100,000 li in a second. This person's arrow had been split into 9 in order to intercept Yixing, and he had succeeded. But now, Yixing was running in the opposite direction. If he wanted to stop Yixing, he would first have to shoot the arrow in front of Yixing, then change direction and shoot at Yixing. With his attainments in archery, it wasn't impossible, but Yixing's speed was too fast. If it was an ordinary true god who could travel 10 to 20,000 miles in a breath, he would definitely be able to circle around and intercept the arrow. However, Yixing could travel tens of thousands of miles in a breath. By the time his arrow reached the front, Yixing would have enough time to dodge, so there was no way he could intercept it. Therefore, he simply condensed his power and unleashed an extremely fast and powerful attack, hoping to kill him in one strike. No matter how fast Yixing was, he was not faster than this arrow. In the blink of an eye, Yixing was shot again. However, this time, the arrow was shot from behind. Yixing was hit by the arrow, and the impact of the arrow's power made him even faster, and although this arrow was powerful, it had not reached the level of a quasi-god for Nirvana's, so the damage it could do to Yixing was limited. It only left a fist-sized hole in Yixing's divine body, which healed in the blink of an eye. True God Jin Ao and Quasi-God 7 Nirvana's archer pushed their speed to the limit as they chased after Yixing. The other true gods also caught up, but they were clearly much slower than the two. Sect Master Jin Ding, Young Master Tian Yuan, True God Jin Ao and Quasi-God 7 Nirvana's archer were clearly familiar with each other, and they greeted each other. The Sky Origin Divine Sect was a faction of the Milky Way continent, and one of the top factions. The standard of martial arts in the Milky Way continent was higher than in the Star Origin continent, and it could be compared to the Dark Star continent. As one of the top factions, the Sky Origin Divine Sect was much stronger than the Golden Cauldron Divine Sect. The sect master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect had only become a true god after 8 nirvanas. He was called Kyohoshi, and he was close to 30,000 years old. His lifespan was approaching, and he only had 1 or 2,000 years left. The young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect was not the son of the sect master, but the disciple of the Sky Origin Divine Sect's sect master. He was the number 1 genius of the Sky Origin Divine Sect after the current sect master. He had an 8-star blue fate, and he would be able to experience 8 nirvanas in the future. He had a chance to become Kyohoshi, and he had already been designated as the young sect master. Once the sect master's lifespan was up, he would take over the position. Although the young master's current strength was not on par with true god Jin Ao's, his prospects were much better than true god Jin Ao's. As such, true god Jin Ao, the number 1 expert of the Star Origin continent, was very humble in front of the young master. True god Jin Ao chased after Yixing and said, "Young master Tian Yuan, if you catch the arrow god, I only want his life, and the black and yellow spiritual energy will be yours." This was the time to express his attitude. If the young master did not exist, true god Jin Ao would have been able to refine the black and yellow spiritual energy and become a 5-star true god. However, even if he became a 5-star true god, he would not be able to fight against the Sky Origin Divine Sect. Therefore, once the young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect arrived, even if he snatched the black and yellow spiritual energy, it would be useless. Instead, he would lose his life. Therefore, he had to express his attitude early to prevent the young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect from misunderstanding. The young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect and true god Jin Ao snorted coldly, and a look of disdain appeared on his arrogant face. "Arrow god? Humph! You dare to use such a title, aren't you afraid of biting your tongue? Fine, his life is yours, and the black and yellow spiritual energy is mine." As he spoke, the young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect shot out another arrow. The golden arrow was like a divine spear, and in a breath's time, it caught up to Yixing. Yixing did not waste time dodging. He allowed the arrow to hit him, increasing his speed and increasing the distance between him and the young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect. The young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect wanted to attack Yixing with another arrow, but he could no longer do so. True god Jin Ao said, "Our sect has a 3-star true god guarding the entrance and exit of the bound of universe. Arrow god won't be able to escape. With our forces surrounding him, no matter how fast he is, he will eventually fall into our hand." The young master of the Sky Origin Divine Sect nodded. He took out the speed communication pearl and informed the other true gods of the Sky Origin Divine Sect to surround Huang Xiaolong. True god Jin Ao had the true gods of the Golden Cauldron Divine Sect circle around to the side. Unless Yixing went straight ahead, if he wanted to turn left or right, he would definitely be blocked by the true gods of both sides. Not to mention the fact that the black and yellow space had an end, it was impossible to keep going forward. Even the spatial storms that frequently appeared in the black and yellow space would have to make way for them. Therefore, they could not keep going forward. Moreover, the Golden Cauldron Divine Sect and the Sky Origin Divine Sect were top forces in their respective continents. They had a lot of power and had many allies. There were also many true gods of other sects that obeyed their orders and assisted in hunting down Yixing. Yixing had the black and yellow spiritual energy on him. This plaything was a treasure, but it was also a taunting halo. In fact, there was no need for the Golden Cauldron Divine Sect and the Sky Origin Divine Sect to mobilize. As long as the other true gods knew that the black and yellow spiritual energy was on Yixing, they would automatically join in the battle to surround Yixing. Now, Yixing was like the black and yellow spiritual energy, surrounded and chased by a large number of true gods. However, the black and yellow spiritual energy did not have spirituality, while Yi Xing had consciousness. Moreover, Yi Xing had the god eye of Void Breaker. When he looked around, his line of sight was stronger than other true gods. Although there were many true gods surrounding him, he was able to escape from the encirclement several times. As the true gods of the black and yellow space gradually knew that the black and yellow spiritual energy was on Yi Xing, more and more true gods surrounded Yi Xing. It was harder for him to break out. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.